like to thank one of my subscribers, Astarte Jones, for this article. Came out in the New York Times, September 17th, 2018, the federal agency that fuels the opioid crisis. And they're talking about the DEA. The Drug Enforcement Administration has proved itself incompetent for decades. Every day, nearly 200 people across the country die from drug overdoses. Opioids have been the primary driver in this calamity, first as prescription painkillers, then heroin, and more recently, illicit manufactured fentanyl. The death toll has risen steadily over the past 2 decades. So that's 20 years this opioid plague has been going on. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, even the crack epidemic did not last this long. Okay, they have gone way past the crack epidemic. The Drug Enforcement Administration, the agency that most directly oversees access to opioids, deserves much of the blame for these deaths. Because of its incompetence, the opioid plague has gone from bad to worse. The solution, overhauling the agency or even getting rid of it entirely. The problem begins with poor design, a brainchild of Richard Nixon's war on drugs. The agency sought to cut off the supplies of drugs on the black market here and abroad. But in passing, the Controlled Substances Act of 1970, Congress also gave the agency broad authority over how prescription opioids and other controlled substances were classified, produced, and distributed. The agency was supposed to curb problematic drug use, but failed to do so because its tactics were never informed by public health or addiction science. Despite the investment of hundreds of billions of tax dollars and the earnest efforts of thousands of employees, the DEA's track record is abysmal. The agency has been unable to balance legitimate access to and control of prescription drugs, the widespread over relevance on opioids, along with benzos, amphetamines, and other scheduled medications, has created a booming black market. And, a few months ago, they went out there and shut down a few dark webs out there, websites on the dark web, and more just cropped up, ladies and gentlemen. They're still going strong selling drugs over the dark web, but they sell a lot of things. There's a lot of prostitution. They're selling firearms, drugs, you name it. You name it, they're selling it out there. Human trafficking, everything evil under the sun is being marketed and sold out there. The agency's enforcement strategies and the support it has lent to local and state police departments have also fueled abusive police tactics, including dangerous no-knock raids and ethnic profiling of drivers. It has eroded civil liberties through the expansion of warrantless surveillance and overseen arbitrary seizures of billions of dollars of private property without any clear connection to drug-related crimes. So in other words, they're doing seizures on people that have nothing to do with drugs and seizing their property. And they got it all rigged up, ladies and gentlemen. Once they seize your stuff, you can't get it back. They got this place so rigged up and corrupt, it's not even funny. And they actually believe we want this shit to go on forever. Yeah, right. So anyway, let's go on. These actions have disproportionately targeted people of color, contributing to disparities in mass incarceration, confiscation, and that's the property that they confiscate from our people that get mass incarcerated. So they take your home, they take your car, they seize your bank account, steal it all. And a lot of times these people have nothing to do with drugs. But see, this is what happens when you're under people with a serious God complex and they don't believe they do anything wrong. And they probably are the most flawed people on earth. But let's go on. Collective trauma. The United States was ill-equipped to navigate the worst drug crisis in its history, with the DEA at the vanguard. Starting in the late 90s, the manufacturing, distribution, and prescribing of opioids began to increase rapidly. Overdose deaths soared since so many people were prescribed opioids and many mixed them with alcohol and other sedative drugs. The DEA could have marshaled a calibrated response, expanding evidence-based treatment and reducing the prescription of especially risky drug combinations. So in this drug war, the only one that's been impacted the most, ladies and gentlemen, are Black people, but not the junkies on opioids. You know, they get drug court. They get another chance. They don't have to go to jail. They're not being mass incarcerated. All right. Instead, the agency pushed for surveillance of prescription records and electronic communication, doubled down on prosecuting prescribers, and helped to tighten the screws on patients seeking pain relief. Meanwhile, life-saving opioid treatments that the DEA closely regulates, like methadone, have remained extremely difficult to obtain. Indeed, these problems were much broader than the alleged industry. All right, let me just go down. Let me just go down a bit. A decade into the crisis, more and more prescription drug users turn to the black market, which we know that's just the dark web. Even though the DEA had tried to eradicate illicit drugs for nearly 50 years, users could easily buy stolen or counterfeit pills along with a cheaper option, heroin. Soon, some began injecting. Outbreaks of HIV and hepatitis C followed, and also hepatitis A is up there too. Meanwhile, people who sought evidence-based treatment were rarely able to access it because of the agency's evolving regulating and enforcement strategies, which I'm not surprised, ladies and gentlemen. So what they're pretty much saying in a nutshell in this article, the DEA has caused more harm than good in this alleged drug war that's going on out here. And they have not stopped any deaths. They have not stopped the flow of drugs coming into the country. They have not stopped the rise in people going to the street drug. They have literally not stopped a damn thing in the 50 years that they have existed. I mean, seriously, think about this. In the last 50 years, can you think of one decade where it was less illicit drugs available? I'll wait. Okay. And if you can't think of any decade, that tells you this agency is not effective at all. It's not effective. All they're doing is just seizures of money and drugs and people's property and cars and bank accounts, but they are not making any impact on the actual drug plague that's going on. So now they're rethinking, should this agency even exist? Okay. And, right now, just listening to this, it's a waste of taxpayer money for them to even be employed in DEA. They're not doing nothing. They're not making any impact out here on anyone's life. The answers lie at the local and state levels. In Rhode Island, opioid overdoses are declining because people behind bars have access to effective treatment. Massachusetts has deployed drop-in centers offering treatment, naloxone, and other services. San Francisco and Seattle are planning to open safe consumption spaces, which show tremendous promise as a tool to reduce overdose deaths. Yeah, well, guess what? The DOJ said if they open those sites up, they're going to shut them down. They're illegal. And other drug-related harm. But the DEA and its institutional parent, the Justice Department, stand in the way of some of these experiments. We ought to reinvent the DEA, considering its lack of public health and healthcare orientation. The agency's regulatory and authority over the pharmaceutical supply could be transferred to strengthening an independent food and drug administration, while the regulation of medical and pharmacy practice can be ceded to the states. Parts of the DEA's law enforcement mandate should be transferred to the FBI, delegated back to the local or state, or eliminated. A significant portion of the DEA's budget should be reinvested in life-saving measures like access to high-quality treatment. The Drug Enforcement Administration has had over 40 years to win the war on drugs. They sure have, and they haven't won it, ladies and gentlemen. They lost it. In fact, let's just go and say it. They lost this war on drugs. Anytime you got hundreds of people dying every single day in this country from drug overdoses, they lost the war. Instead, its tactics have fueled the opioid plague. To finally make a dent in this national emergency, we need to rethink the agency from the bottom up. It shouldn't exist. If it's not doing anything effective out here as far as getting rid of the drug addiction, and, if they were making an impact, you would see less and less people dying from drug overdoses every day. But we're not seeing that at all. All we're looking at is an agency. What's the difference between them and a burglar? Seriously, what's the difference between the DEA and the burglars? Nothing. They're not effective. Either one are effective in this drug plague that's going on. So the way I see it, ladies and gentlemen, I wouldn't care if this damn agency disappeared. As far as I'm concerned, all of these corrupt agencies need to disappear. None of them are no damn good. Isn't it amazing? Every agency they have put up in this country, every last one of them are corrupt, and none of them are a damn bit of good. That should say a lot to everybody. Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell, and I will see you on the next video. Peace, family. article that came out in the San Diego Union Tribune, September 17th, 2018. As opioid death toll worsens, California doctors will soon be required to check patient prescription drug history. What they mean by that, ladies and gentlemen, is states, not all states, but states have to keep a database on prescriptions that are written. And if they notice that a person has been doing what they call doctor shopping, they go from one doctor to the next getting the same narcotic over and over, then they should be alerted by it, by the database. Now, here's the problem. California had this database in place for a few decades, and they ignored the database and kept giving patients all this opioid scripts. Now, in the beginning of this article, it talks about a 59-year-old woman that was given 75 prescriptions for opioids in 1 year because no one had checked the database. They just kept writing the scripts over and over without checking. So really, by them not checking the database to see how many prescriptions that she got, they're really contributing to the problem. So in California, they had a database for prescription history where doctors, pharmacies, and other healthcare providers could go out there and see a history of how many scripts were written for each patient. And they failed to do it. So beginning October 2nd, a new law makes consulting that database mandatory. So they can no longer write scripts without checking the database to see the patient's prescription history. By logging into a web-based program, prescribing physicians should easily be able to spot signs of a doctor shopper, someone who sees multiple doctors to load up on prescription drugs, or indications of dangerous medication combinations. Armed with that information, physicians can provide drug safety warnings, deny the patient's requests for prescriptions, and even offer help and hope when drug abuse is suspected. My question is, why did California drop the ball so badly? It's almost like they're trying to ignore that. California created the first system to track prescriptions of the strongest painkillers, but our state fell behind as the opioid plague grew, said State Senator Ricardo Lara, who drafted the legislation in 2015. I wrote SB 482 to require that doctors and other consult the cures system. Okay, so it's called the cures system before prescribing those powerful and addictive drugs. This tool will help limit doctor shopping, break the cycle of addiction, and prevent prescriptions from ever again fueling an epidemic and claims thousands of lives. Yeah, technically no. And this is why it will not work 100%. As long as you have the dark web and the illegal drug out on the street, you're not breaking the cycle. All you're doing is preventing them from getting the drug from the doctor, which means that person is now going to turn to the street drugs. Never mind. Why should I help them? But let me just move on. The Controlled Substance Utilization Review and Evaluation System, called CURES for short, provides an accounting of a patient's prescription, the doctors who prescribed them, and the pharmacies that filled them. It allows the orthopedist to see what a psychiatrist is doing and the emergency room doctor to see what the physician is doing. I think people make the mistake of thinking it's just for doctor shopping. Okay, so, people are going to come up with many innovative ways. If they can't doctor shop, they go to the emergency room. Many of them are out here injuring their pets to get the opioids because, they give the same opioids to dogs and cats. So they'll injure their pet just to get over to the veterinarian's office and get a prescription of pain pills for the dog. And they end up taking the pain pills, and the dog have to suffer in pain until they heal on their own. You know, these people are sick. They are sick. So the law generally requires all healthcare practitioners to consult the database before issuing new prescriptions to patients, or once every 4 months if a prescription remains a part of a patient's treatment plan. There are exceptions. Emergency departments and surgical teams can prescribe a non-refillable 5-day supply without first consulting. In other emergency situations where cures is not reasonably possible, a 5-day non-refillable supply is allowed, but the prescriber must document the reason for skipping consultation. The law does not apply to hospice care. Okay, which makes sense. Those people are at the end of their life. So why would you deny them the drugs just to keep them comfortable in those last moments that they're alive? But I just can't believe California actually fueled their problem by having a database but not checking it. And so all of these patients have been able to get away with like an unlimited supply of opioids because people just simply didn't do their job. Well, ladies and gentlemen, again, this ain't going nowhere, y'all. It's not going anywhere. Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell, and I will see you on the next video. Peace, family. Seriously, the US is just one big old land filled with junkies. This just came out in the Daily Mail. Millions of elderly Americans are hooked on Xanax. 1 in 4 older adults prescribed drugs for sleep issues and depression become addicted, study warns. And I believe it. Who's not addicted in America? So this came out September 10th, 2018. Millions of elderly Americans are becoming highly addicted to anti-anxiety medicines that treat depression, anxiety, and sleep issues, a study had warned. figures compiled by the University of Michigan show that 1 in 4 older patients who are prescribed the class of drugs known as benzos never stop using them. Of the close to 50 million US adults age 65 or older, 9% are prescribed benzos, such as Xanax and Valium, more than any other age group, and the rate of use only increases with age. These drugs are being increasingly scrutinized as drivers of America addiction epidemic alongside opioids, as more and more Americans struggle to get off them. But the Michigan team warned no attention is being paid by the general public and doctors to the hardest hit group, the elderly, who are more reluctant to experiment with less powerful forms of treatment. Benzos, prescribed under names such as Valium and Xanax, are recommended for short-term treatment among older adults because they are easily flushed from the body. For the study, the team looked at the use of the pills by low-income older adults who were 78 years old on average in Pennsylvania. The participants were part of a supporting seniors receiving treatment and intervention, which helps older people with drug costs. Researchers interviewed the adults to check for a variety of mental health issues, including depression, anxiety, and any sleeping difficulties. They also calculated a medication possession ratio of how many days supply they had been prescribed and how many days the prescription was valid. The MPR of 30% or more over the course of a year was defined as long-term use. Close to 600 adults received their first prescription of benzos between 2008 and 2016 from either primary care physicians or other non-psychiatrists. The research found that around 26% of the group still had a current or recent prescription just 1 year later. Long-term use was most common among white patients who were 4 times more likely to become addicted. Additionally, the patients who received the largest amount were the most likely to become long-term users. Some had received close to 8 months worth of benzos. Wow, how do you prescribe somebody 8 months worth of pills like that? Of Xanax? Wow. For every 10 extra days the prescription was written for long-term use, risk doubled. The National Institute of Health says the rate of benzos use is highest among older people, despite several studies that have shown it increase the risk of car crashes and broken bones. I guess they are getting car accidents with all that Xanax and getting behind the wheel. Oh my God. This is because some of the drug side effects include drowsiness and fatigue. Additionally, in 2014, a study published in the British Medical Journal found an association between benzos use in older people and an increased risk of Alzheimer's disease. Lead author, Dr. Lauren Gerlach, said the rate of adults going on to long-term use is concerning. This shows that we need to help providers start with the end in mind when prescribing benzos. by beginning with a short-term duration prescription and engage patients in discussion of when to reevaluate their symptoms and begin tapering the patient off, she said. We also need to educate providers about effective non-pharmaceutical treatment alternatives, such as cognitive behavior therapy for these patients. You know, isn't this the same thing that happened with opioids? The doctors overprescribed the pills and then all these people became hooked on it. Well, isn't this the same thing? They're just doing it to the elderly. They're giving them a long-term supply of Xanax and Valium when you're only supposed to be on that stuff for the short term. So it tells me that these doctors just have a normal habit of overprescribing medicine in this country. It is just a normal everyday habit. You know, these people get hooked and they just keep giving them more pills and giving them more pills. That's what it sounds like to me. No wonder why everybody in this damn place is a junkie. She said, though, through interviews, the team found that long-term users were not more likely to have been diagnosed with anxiety or depression, but they were more likely to have sleep issues. However, benzos are not recommended as a replacement for sleep aids because they can cause daytime sleepiness and therefore worsen sleep. Since mental health providers see only a very small minority of older adults who have mental health issues, we need to support primary care providers better as they manage these patients' care, says Dr. Gerlach. We must help them think critically about how certain prescriptions they write could increase the chance of long-term use. Well, are these doctors just stupid? But you know what, ladies and gentlemen, no, they're not stupid, because the more scripts they write, the more they get from these pharmaceutical companies that encourage these doctors to write all of these scripts. So I'm not too surprised about this, but it's jacked up. Now you got an elderly crowd that are drug addicts too, along with the opioid addicts and your heroin addicts and your fentanyl addicts and your meth addicts. Now you got one more to add on to the list, the elderly, hooked on Xanax and Valium. Unbelievable. Only in America, y'all. Only in America. Please tell me what you think, ladies and gentlemen. Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell, and I will see you on the next video. Peace, family. This is a story that came out on Delaware Online. Fentanyl, what is it and why it's claiming the lives of dozens of Delawareans. Now, Delaware is one of those small but dense states. And, you know, I'm not really surprised because of the kind of population that's there that it's making a huge impact there. All right, so this article came out September 7th, 2018. Drug overdoses are ravishing Delaware this year. claiming an estimate 193 lives so far, according to the state health department. Officials believe the bulk of those overdoses are the result of fentanyl-laced heroin or, at times, straight fentanyl, which looks identical to heroin but has 50 to 100 times the potency. Here's what you need to know about synthetic pain-killing drug. What is fentanyl? So we know what fentanyl is. It's stronger than morphine. A lot of times your cancer patients are using this, especially towards the end of their life, just to manage the pain. Drug companies offered it as a lozenge and a subliminal to be placed under the tongue, a tablet, a film, or one of those pills that you put in your mouth and it just dissolves. And that's really good, especially for people with cancer, because in many cases they have a hard time keeping things down at that point. So something that dissolves in the mouth is actually perfect for them. But when people began illegally manufacturing it, it made its way to the streets. Today, the white powdery substance is often mixed with heroin or sold as heroin because the two look so similar. So you can see the spike over the years in Delaware, all the way across on this graph. And it's at the highest peak right now for fentanyl, and then heroin and cocaine. So, I'm not really surprised. Um, Delaware has been one of those states that has been hard hit for a few years now. So it's really not too shocking. In 2017, about 61% of the overdose deaths in Delaware involved fentanyl, according to the state data. And in most overdose deaths, multiple substances were reported. Other top substances reported were heroin and cocaine, both of which are hard to distinguish from street fentanyl. The drug is especially harmful because its potency makes it able to be absorbed through the skin. First responders now take extra precaution at crime scenes when dealing with potential heroin overdoses and no longer field test because of the rise in fentanyl. How to spot an overdose in Delaware has a 9/11 Good Samaritan law. So in other words, you don't get in trouble and the junkie don't get in trouble if you call 911. So in other words, they will show up and they won't ask for ID or ask you to reveal anything about yourself on the spot. That's how they got it set up for the drug addicts today. But if you remember, during the crack epidemic, if the police showed up, everybody in the house went to jail, even if you had nothing to do with crack. You still went to jail. It's amazing how things have changed. Okay, so Delaware has a 911 Good Samaritan law, which protects those reporting an overdose and those in medical distress from arrest for low-level drug crimes. If you see someone overdosing, call 911. So they're just telling you. So the signs of a person that's overdosing: drowsiness and nodding out, trouble breathing, difficult to wake or very drowsy, weak pulse, blue or ashen skin, loud or erratic snoring. Amazing, right? So they're showing you how Narcan is used and putting it up each nostril. I think you have to give like 2 squirts with the Narcan in each nostril. So that's all. They just want to encourage the public in Delaware to help these junkies whenever you see them passed out all over the place. But please tell me what you think, ladies and gentlemen. Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell, and I will see you on the next video. Peace, family. Many of you might already know that right behind opioids is a meth epidemic that's also going on in the country. This came out in the Gazette, September 9th, 2018. Meth makes comeback in Colorado, El Paso County as opioid plague worsens. Methamphetamines use made a deadly comeback in El Paso County and across Colorado last year, while festering in the shadows of the nation's opioid plague. Meth-related deaths in the county nearly doubled from 2016 to 2017, from 36 to 67, while meth ranked among the fastest growing drugs and fatalities elsewhere in the state. The rise in meth deaths helped push Colorado drug fatalities above 1,000 in 2017 for the first time on record, hundreds more than the state's traffic death toll for the year. Now remember, Narcan does not work on meth. But the trend comes as Colorado communities battle the plague of the prescription painkillers and their illicit cousins, heroin, still the top cause of fatal overdoses in the state. Colorado had 560 opioid-related deaths last year, 92 of them in the county. So that plague has dominated headlines. Public health, work, and lawmakers time from the State House in Denver to Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. You think we have no meth problem? We do. But it's been overshadowed by opioids, said Tom Gorman, director of the Rocky Mountain High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Program. Given the record-breaking death toll across the county and state, new approaches are needed to prevent overdoses, no matter the drug, said Dr. Leon Kelly, Deputy Chief Medical Examiner for the county's coroner office. There's certainly a component of this that is a law enforcement issue, but this is overwhelmingly a public health issue, Kelly said. And that's the way it needs to be treated. Well, I wish these attitudes were around back in the 80s and 90s. It needs to be treated like we treat infections and outbreaks. I don't know why they keep comparing this drug plague to viruses and diseases. I just don't get it. Never mind. Let me move on. I know they're going to come and say this is a disease and all this other stuff. I know. It needs to be treated like infections or outbreaks and allow people to get help when they need it. Meth-related overdose deaths have been on the rise in the county and across Colorado for about a decade. County meth fatalities grew from 1 to 2 in 2008 to last year's record of 67, say recent data from Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. The same deadly trends go for the rest of Colorado. After recording a few dozen meth-related deaths through the early 2000s, the body count reached 299 last year. Much of the increase came over the past 5 years, and in 2017 marked the first time in at least a decade that meth caused more deaths than heroin. Okay, so, we heard the effects of meth. It speeds up the heart rate, and it can possibly cause stroke and heart attack in people, but of course they don't care. They still take this stuff and stay up for days and sometimes a week because they're all methed out. The meth trend represents a step back in the state's year-long battle against highly addictive drug. A public service campaign featuring posters of graphic depictions of the drug's side effects, such as rotting teeth, appearing several years ago throughout the state to dissuade children and teenagers from using it. And lawmakers restricted access to many over-the-counter cold and flu medicines whose main ingredients was used to make the drug. Okay, so the goal stopped dealers from turning houses into meth labs that could supply homegrown batches while putting neighbors at risk of house explosions and myriad related crimes. But you know what? Most of the meth in the country actually comes across the border from Mexico because it's supposed to be a lot more pure than the meth that they made in meth labs that they made, that homes that were made into meth labs. The law appeared to work. The number of meth labs seized in Colorado dropped from 401 to 2002 to just 2 last year, according to the Rocky Mountain High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Program. But the black market appears to have adapted, Gorman said. Cartels from Mexico appear to be supplying much of the meth sold in Colorado, leading to an increase in the drug's purity and a decrease in its price. Gorman said that the Drug Task Force has been overburdened responding to opioid plague and illegal marijuana grows to battle meth. Well, you're going to keep being exhausted because these folks are not getting off of drugs, period. They're not going to do it. In a way, I hate to say this, it's almost a forgotten drug, he said. Meth resurgence come as the opioid plague continues to worsen across Colorado. Statewide, 1,012 people died of accidental overdose last year, 100 more than 2016. State Health Department records show. And see, ladies and gentlemen, this is why they're never going to report all 50 states because they never want you to figure out how bad these drug deaths really are. They're going to continue to undercount it and 1,000 people. But see, it's very contradictory. And this is why I'm saying it. It's contradictory because they're giving us these lowball numbers and at the same time telling us that the life expectancy is dropping. There is no damn way. We are a country with millions and millions of people, and you're going to convince everybody that 72,000 people changed the life expectancy. That is not even possible. The only way the life expectancy would drop, it would have impacted hundreds of thousands to millions of people. And that's what they don't want you to know. There is no way 72,000 is too small of a number to impact life expectancy. So they are lowballing the numbers by design. But please tell me what you think, ladies and gentlemen. Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell, and I'll see you on the next video. Peace, family. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a story that came out in my Dayton Daily News. And we all know that most Black men in this country go to jail for drug possession. It ain't hardly no damn violent crimes. That's the lie they love to put out there. We know criminalization of Black people started the day that we walked off of the plantation, all by design, so that they would have a reason to put you in prison for the 13th Amendment. It's all tied together. But here we go again. It never makes any sense to me on why they legalize marijuana. And in those states where it's legalized, they're still arresting you for drug possession for marijuana. When is this place ever going to make sense? When? September 7th, 2018, Black men are far more likely than any other population segment to face minor marijuana possession charges in the city of Dayton, really all over the United States, according to a Dayton Daily News analysis of municipal court records. This finding comes at a time when the fairness and impact of marijuana laws has become a notable topic, because Dayton residents in November will vote on whether the city should cease fines on possessing small amounts of pot. Across the nation, Black people are arrested and cited for pot more often than white people, decriminalization supporters said. I think the numbers bear it out that this is a civil rights issue. And a big criticism we've continued to have is that drug policy has been unequally applied based on race, said Dayton Mayor Nan Wiley, who personally plans to vote in favor of decriminalization. Critics of decriminalization have said it could lead to more substance abuse, which contributes to vehicle crashes and harms job prospects. In other words, they don't want it to go away. They want Black men to be the ones going to jail. There's no justifiable reason for it if you are making it legal everywhere. Then it makes no sense to keep locking people up for that reason. But, they're going to hang on to this for dear life for the obvious reasons. The Dayton Daily News reviewed about 300 minor misdemeanor pot possession cases filed in Dayton Municipal Court in the first quarter of 2018. Minor misdemeanor pot possession was one of the more common offenses in criminal court, which police can charge under state or city code. About 7 in 10 defendants were Black men, according to case information summaries. About 10% of defendants were Black women. About 14% were white men, and less than 6% were white women. A small number of cases did not have information identifying defendants' race or gender. The average age of people cited for having pot was 30, but defendants' ages range from 18 to 63. Dayton's population is about 55% white and 40% Black, according to the US Census. Some advocates of reform, marijuana laws, and civil rights group say they hope Dayton residents 2 months from now will vote in favor of relaxing the city's pot laws. Minor marijuana possession offenses, and many of them young people, should not be saddled with a criminal record and the lifelong penalty and stigma associated with it, said Justin, whatever, Stragle, political director. All right, let me just go down a little. Critics of decriminalization say removing the penalties for pot could lead to more substance abuse and public safety problems. Montgomery County Phil Plummer recently said employers already have a very hard time finding employees who can pass a drug test. Decriminalizing this illegal substance will only shrink our pool of qualified workers, he said. That will be terrible for our business community. Well, if you legalize it, then there should really be no more testing for it. You know, plain and simple. Once it's legal, you should be testing for other substances, and marijuana should be let go as one of those substances that you're testing for. Marijuana arrest rates across the nation are significantly higher for Black people, even though a variety of research indicates that marijuana use is nearly the same between Black and white Americans, advocates say. The National Survey on Drug Use and Health survey, conducted by a branch of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, estimated that about 45% of Black adults and 53% of white adults in 2016 reported ever using marijuana. Also, about 17% of Black adults and 14% of white adults say they had used marijuana in the past year, the survey found. So any suggestion that disproportionate rates of arrest are explained by Black people using or possessing marijuana more than white people should be rejected. Angelina Jackson, Assistant Public Defender for the Montgomery County Public Defender's Office, wrote in an email. Further, I would urge caution in accepting any suggestion that marijuana citations are merely incidental to other arrests. It's basically explaining the disparity by saying Black people commit more crimes in general, so therefore they get more weed tickets. And that's just isn't true. In Ohio, about 14% of the adults say they had used marijuana in the past year, or about 1.4 million people, according to 2015 and 2016 National Survey on Drug Use and Health data. Dayton City Commission last month approved holding an advisory election on November 6 to ask Dayton residents if they wish to decriminalize specific misdemeanor marijuana and hashish offenses. If the majority of electors vote in favor of decriminalization, Dayton leaders plan to eliminate the fine of $150 for minor misdemeanor pot possession and the other charges to reduce penalty related to pot, hash, and marijuana paraphernalia violations. The criminalization proposal looks to be a modest but Very welcome change to marijuana laws in the city of Dayton. Okay, so let me just go down. Marijuana possession of less than 100 grams is already a minor misdemeanor, a violation of the lowest level. But getting rid of the $150 fine will be very beneficial for those most impacted by law enforcement of marijuana laws, which tend to be people of color and lower income residents, he said. Pardon that. That's my neighbor's dog barking. Sorry about that, y'all. Just came out of nowhere. They bear the brunt of the war on drugs and have for the entire history of the war on drugs, he said. This newspaper's review of municipal court records revealed that many people charged with pot possession do not pay the entire fine on time. People who are cited for minor marijuana possessions and who do not pay the fine and do not show up in court face arrest for failure to appear. People get caught up in the criminal justice system that becomes more and more serious over time, Daniel said. You don't show up to court because you don't have the money and are afraid of the consequences, or you don't pay the fine and then a warrant is put out for your arrest. He also said decriminalization promotes irresponsible substance abuse, which put children and the motor public at risk. You know what? They're no more at risk than people behind the wheel with alcohol. That's how I see it. And, I don't smoke anything. I don't smoke cigarettes or pot, but I don't see why, if more and more places are legalizing it, I don't even understand why that should even be on the books as a crime anymore. Plain and simple. Either it's legal or it's not. If it's legal, then stop arresting people for that reason. They go after Black men and Black people really because, number one, you are not committing the most crimes. Number two, you ain't committing the most violent crimes. So they just get you on anything they can. And marijuana is the easiest thing to get Black people on. And that's it, plain and simple. Anybody else that tells you different, they're full of crap and you shouldn't listen to nothing that they say. All right, let's listen to this video. Let me get the sound on.
To consider the decriminalization of marijuana according to our code of ordinance.
And is there a petition on that, or does that just go right to the ballot now?
It'll go right to the ballot. We've had some folks circulating, commissions talked about it. And really, I think the commission is mostly comfortable with it, but we want to hear from the voters as soon as we put it on the November ballot.
You said you support it. What's the reason you support this?
Look, I think in general that we have proven that our drug policy is pretty wrong-headed when it comes to the criminalization of this effort. We see that nonviolent offenders that do end up going to jail actually become violent at the end. It doesn't really solve anybody's issues, and it doesn't really make our community. For the November 6th general election in the city of Dayton to consider the decriminalization of marijuana according to our code of ordinance.
And is there a petition on that, or does that just go right to the ballot now?
It'll go right to the ballot. We've had some folks circulating, commissions talked about it. And really, I think the commission is mostly comfortable with it, but we want to hear from the voters as soon as we put it on the November ballot.
You said you support it. What's the reason you support this?
Look, I think in general that we have proven that our drug policy is pretty wrong-headed when it comes to the criminalization of this effort. We see that nonviolent offenders that do end up going to jail actually become violent at the end. It doesn't really solve anybody's issues, and it doesn't really make her
then become a misdemeanor in the fourth degree. Under that is a minor misdemeanor. The minor misdemeanor is usually how the city police go about finding and citing individuals for possession. So that is in essence what we are changing. That fine right now is $150. That will, if this is approved, will be reduced to $0. So that 0 to 100 gram limit will be a $0 fine.
Okay. Please tell me what you think, ladies and gentlemen. Please leave your comment. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a story that came out in the Columbus Dispatch. Authorities attribute increase in overdose deaths in central Ohio to fentanyl mix. Fentanyl seems to be taking them out like flies these days. Central Ohio authorities are attributing a recent spike in overdose deaths to the powerful prescription painkiller fentanyl, which they say is increasingly mixed with other illegal drugs, such as cocaine and marijuana. The Franklin County Coroner's Office announced on Wednesday that there were 18 suspected overdose deaths in the previous week, including 5 in a 24-hour period. Tests that determine which drugs attributed to a fatal overdose can take months, but a preliminary examination points to fentanyl. Franklin County Coroner Anahi Ortiz said Friday a toxicologist was able to do a screen on the first 5, Ortiz said. Every single one of them had fentanyl in their system. The number of total overdoses has held steady, with paramedics administering the overdose antidote, naloxone, between 8 and 9 times per day in recent days. The battalion chief, Steve Martin of the Columbus Division of Fire, it's the dead-on arrival count that's going up, he says. Fentanyl is roughly 100 times more potent, yes, we know, than morphine. They put that in every article, it seems like. While Martin cautioned that the official toxicology has yet to come back on any of the recent overdose deaths, he said that fentanyl mixed with other drugs is the likely culprit. And remember, that's what's pouring in here from China. Martin pointed to 2 possible reasons why dealers would mix the powerful drug with other intoxicating substances. There's no laboratory controls over sanitation in a drug house, which may cross-contaminate, and the mixing of drugs, more likely, he said. Dealers might also be mixing fentanyl with their other products to give them an extra kick to keep customers coming back, Martin says. He said worries that drug users and their friends and family might not realize they need naloxone if the users aren't abusing opioids such as heroin or fentanyl, he said. But the mixing of drugs means opioid overdoses are a possibility even with non-opiate drugs. It is not clear where the fentanyl is coming from, but on August, Columbus police raided a house on the 300 block of South Wayne Avenue in the Hilltop and seized 1 kilo, roughly 2.2 pounds, the drug making for arrest. Okay, I get it. In spite of the recent bad news, overdose deaths are trending downward in central Ohio. Franklin County, for example, saw a roughly 13% decrease in fatal overdoses in the first quarter of 2018 when compared to the first quarter of 2017. The Rapid Response Addiction and Crisis Team, a partner between the Columbus Division of Fire, Southwest Healthcare, and the Alcohol, Drug, and Mental Health Board of Franklin County, plans to increase outreach in neighborhoods hardest hit by overdoses. Columbus Public Health sent out an advisory on Thursday reminding Central Ohioans that naloxone is available at the Columbus Division of Fire headquarters at 3639 Parsons Avenue from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., Monday through Friday. Franklin County Public Health also provides free naloxone training and naloxone kits through the website. So, I think they seriously don't know what to do, y'all. They never faced anything like this before. There have been past addictions with opium and opioids, but not to the magnitude that it is today, where you got millions of people doing this stuff in the country. That is what they have never handled before. But, ladies and gentlemen, please leave your comment, subscribe, and make sure you share the videos also on other social media platforms. And until then, I will see you on the next video. Peace, family. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a story that came out on scpr.org, and I will leave the link to this article in the description box, August 30th, 2018. Justice Department promises crackdown on supervised injection sites. Well, we have heard about these sites cropping up around the country. Well, the Justice Department is threatening to shut them all down. So let's get into this story. A top Justice Department official is putting cities considering medically supervised drug injection sites on notice. If you open one, prepare for swift and aggressive legal action. So apparently, this is not okay, because I know I did the story on the city of Philadelphia recently, because they have sites opening up, and I know San Francisco had them, and other cities. I know Colorado, Denver was another place that was looking to open them up, but look like the Justice Department, they ain't having it. With record numbers of fatal overdoses, several cities are working on plans to launch facilities where people can inject illegal drugs with staff on hand to help them if they overdose. Now, however, the Trump administration is vowing a major crackdown. In an interview with NPR, U.S. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein said he understands city leaders are desperate to curb the mounting overdose deaths, but there is one problem. Providing a place for people to use heroin and other illegal substances is a violation of federal law. I am not aware of any valid basis for the argument that you can engage in criminal activity as long as you do it in the presence of someone with a medical condition, Rosenstein said. City officials in Philadelphia and San Francisco say they are moving forward with their plans despite the threats. In California, lawmakers recently passed a bill awaiting the governor's approval that would advance a 3-year supervised injection site pilot program. San Francisco Mayor London Breed says the Justice Department putting cities on notice should not make them back down, given the worsening overdose problem. There is strength in numbers, Breed said at a press conference. And we are talking to other cities who want to consider this as an option. I mean, here in other cities like New York and Seattle, we are trying to address the crisis. The view from Washington is different. Just because someone tells you in San Francisco that San Francisco is not going to prosecute you for doing something that does not make it legal. It remains illegal after federal law, Rosenstein said. If anybody thinks this is a good idea, there's a way to accomplish that. Try to persuade the U.S. Congress to legalize it. His advice to mayors and other top local elected officials: consult your lawyers about all legal repercussions. That could mean criminal prosecution. U.S. attorneys in Philadelphia and Vermont have come out strong against supervised injection sites. But Rosenstein comment remarks the first time a high-ranking Department of Justice official has weighed in on the controversial sites that Philadelphia and about a dozen other jurisdictions are considering in response to the worsening opioid crisis. No matter how severe the crisis get, Rosenstein said, inviting people into a space and permitting them to use dangerous drugs there is a troubling notion. It may, in Rosenstein's view, even accelerate the problem. This is not a disease that get spread like the flu, Rosenstein said. People can only become addicted if they have access to these illegal drugs. And so if we can prevent that access, we can prevent the addiction. But supporters point to the latest grim federal statistics as evidence of why sites are necessary tools to help save lives. More than 72,000 Americans died from overdoses last year, exceeding any one-year death total during the AIDS crisis. In Philadelphia, more than 1,200 people died of drug overdoses, most fueled by opioids last year. That's about 35% more than the deadliest days of the AIDS epidemic, says Philadelphia Health Commissioner Dr. Thomas Farley. This would be the worst public health crisis in a century, Farley says. He says, just as public health officials realize syringe exchanges work to save lives during the worst years of the AIDS epidemic, likewise now, we know there are a lot of needless deaths from drug overdoses, and we know we can save lives because the evidence is clear that these facilities save lives. You know, it's amazing. I don't mean no harm. It's amazing how they want to set up sites for people to come and sit in front of a medical professional to do illegal drugs. Again, crack epidemic, jail. Everybody go to jail. But in this climate, the drug user get amnesty, and they want to invite them to these injection sites to do all the illegal drugs they want. Just do it in front of a medical professional. Personally, y'all, I don't see how that's legal. And he's right. They're committing a crime in front of a medical professional. And they expect law enforcement and everybody to look the other way as they put these sites up and act like, oh, well, this is going to save lives. No, technically it won't. And this is why it won't, ladies and gentlemen. Most drug addicts aren't even going to go to those sites in the first place. When they want to do drugs, they're going to do drugs just like you see them doing it now. They're going to do it at home. They're going to do it at a party. They're going to do it in cars. Anywhere the drug is accessible, they're going to do those drugs. They're not going to wait and drive somewhere to get in front of a medical professional. Most people that buy drugs, they do those illegal drugs immediately after buying them from the dealer. It's not going to be many people looking to drive across town and go to an injection site. A lot of people are not going to do that. The average drug addict will not do that. Canada have these sites up there now that are operating. And Canada is still experiencing a lot of opioid deaths. You know, I understand what they mean. They want to be there just in case these people overdose and they can just give them some Narcan. But it's never going to work out that smoothly. It's been nothing smooth about this drug addiction. It's almost like they're trying everything, it's almost like they're trying everything, including throwing the kitchen sink at this thing. And it's just no stopping it. This is not going to stop what's going on. It's not, you know, and to be honest with you, I can see the Fed showing up and shutting these sites down. I mean, look, you still put people in jail for illegal drugs. So if you're going to do these injections, then, you know, this is why no one trusts this system. They took someone on the street with illegal drugs, that person go to jail. And they got the same exact illegal drug that the person has sitting in the injection site. Woo, I tell you, talk about confusion. But please tell me what you think, ladies and gentlemen. Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell, and I will see you on the next video. This is some crazy mess. Peace, family. Is a story that came out on CNN August 29th, 2018. You know, what I always think is hilarious is how China will play the denial game and beat them at it, beat them at their own game. Beijing rejects Trump's claim that China is behind fentanyl crisis. Now let's listen to Kellyanne, you know, who Trump appointed to head his opioid commission, and her solution is have ice cream and a French fry for the opioid addicts. Now that's some real compassion, y'all. But let's go ahead and listen to this video.
Fentanyl is 50 times lethality, the potency of heroin 100 times the potency of morphine. So what happens when you start taking potency of morphine? So what happens when you start taking opioids and then you run out and start buying street drugs? Often, more often than before, Dan, they're laced with fentanyl.
Let's get back to the story. China's top drug control body has hit back at a recent claim by Trump that Chinese suppliers are fueling America's opioid plague. Yu Heibin, a senior official with China's National Narcotic Control Commission, said in a press briefing Wednesday that Trump's comments were unacceptable and irresponsible. Trump tweeted last week that it was outrageous that China produced fentanyl, a cheap and deadly synthetic opioid is at least 50 times stronger than heroin, continue to pour into the U.S. through international mail. You said the Chinese government found Trump's tweet completely unacceptable. The United States has no proof that most fentanyl in the country comes from China. He said, it's highly irresponsible to draw such a conclusion based on some individual cases. There you go, China, you do the same thing. It's just like when we call out some things and then and what to do about it are adding tensions to U.S.-Chinese relations, which are already strained by disputes over trade and the South China Sea. And those are the reasons why China is going to continue to look the other way as the fentanyl pour into the U.S. Plus, I did a video. China has always weaponized drugs against a nation. They sit back and let it happen for a few years before they start taking over. And you can clearly see China is becoming the next world superpower, and they got it in the works right now while they're just poisoning the American people. What better way to take over the world as a superpower? You weaken your enemy with drugs. Works like a charm. Washington is convinced that China is the primary source of fentanyl found within U.S. borders, following a 2017 U.S. congressional report citing law enforcement and drug investigators. In a cabinet meeting earlier in August, Trump described opioids coming into the United States from China and Mexico as Americans possess them without authorization. NPS includes such designer drugs as fentanyl. Ladies and gentlemen, China is not going to do a thing. Okay. Number one, they are an enemy to the U.S. Number two, Trump has kicked off this trade war, which has highly pissed off China. And their navy in the U.S. will not get out of the South China Sea. And as long as all of these things are going on, don't look for help from China. In fact, before it happened, China was doing very little to nothing in this situation. See, drug dealing in the U.S. is not like drug dealing in China. You know, China don't look at this stuff as serious. This is why every time the U.S. demand they extradite their people, they always refuse. They never cooperate to extraditing There's citizens that are selling drugs, drug lords over in China. China will just ignore the US cries for, don't forget to hit on the notification bell, and I will see you on the next video. Peace, family. This is an editorial that came out August 31st, 2018 in Fredericksburg.com. Why is suicide on the rise in rural America? Suicide to a person trapped in a downward emotional and mental cycle can seem like a logical way out of, I guess, whenever things get unbearable, a person is thinking to themselves, well, I don't really have to be here. When a person has decided to end his life, studies with survivors show he is not, according to the CDC. Suicide rates in the past 2 decades show the illness toll being highest in rural parts of the country, hence states such as Montana, Idaho, South Dakota, Utah, New Mexico, and the rest of America's Western heartland have the highest rates per 100,000 residents. Along these lines, according to Governing Magazine, suicide rates are increasing the fastest in rural America. From 2012 through 16, the rate in rural America increased 14.5%. In small cities, the increase was 13.7% in the same period. The highest rates found in rural states such as Montana, Alaska, and Wyoming. Each more than 25 per 100,000 were 3 times higher than urban states such as Massachusetts, New Jersey, and New York. In 2016, data in New York. In 2016, data also shows something else shocking. Non-Hispanic white males had the highest suicide rate. The medical profession